All right, and welcome everybody to the 10th Showrunner Huddle Q&A. It's crazy that we've already done 10 of these now. We love doing them. It's going to be fun. We've got some questions from you that we're going to answer, and we're also going to open it up and allow y'all to come on and chat with us. I know Chris has already expressed interest in doing that, and we get to his question, so that'll be fun. We'll mix it up a little bit, but we have to begin with some congratulations for Mr. Naster. You're featured in a book.
Yes. David Meerman Scott.
The New Rules of Marketing and PR.
I read this book I think 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. It's still on my shelf, the old version. This is a brand new version, came out, I guess, last week, the 5th edition. And I'm included in it. Well, my podcast is included in it.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's old, or is it new? It's been fully updated. That's why I'm in it. It goes through. It's because it's new rules of marketing. He has to update it every year and a half or 2 years, I think, because he's sold hundreds of thousands of copies. So Wiley Pressing just keeps getting him to update it, and I got put in it. I got a whole featured section. It's amazing. Blown away.
I'm giving you props for being in a book.
Thank you.
Did he contact you? Is it a little interview with you, or did he just find out about your story and write about it?
I interviewed him, and just like as I interviewed Brian Clark, and now I'm here, I interviewed David Meerman Scott, and I ended up here. Interviewing people that are superstars doing amazing things it works. We ended our call and stopped recording. We kind of hit it off. This is the exact same thing that happened with Brian Clark and with this guy. And we just ended up talking. And then he was like, I'm redoing my book. And right now, can I interview you and use you in the book? Of course you can.
If you're the second blogger that gets to interview President Obama, you better be careful.
Well, no, but I mean, this was David was my 30th show or something. I really didn't have a big audience at that time, but we just, it's a relationship we built during the interview, and it turned into me being included in this now. I'm legitimate to my parents now. I can show them this and oh my God, what he does is actually.
Yeah. Thousands of downloads a day, email list, courses make no sense, but being in a book. I know. It's funny how that works out.
It is funny.
So it is.
Keep interviewing people.
Yes. All right. Well, you ready to answer some questions? Let's do this.
Oh, I was going to.
I'm going to take your slurp as a yes.
Well, yeah. That was a question, so I guess me answering that would have been, yes, I'm ready.
Yes.
Right, I got it.
Okay, so let's kick things off here. And I think there's one question that is the best place to kick off. And this was from Samuel. He asked this in the Facebook group. And this is the question that I think kind of hits on the theme that we're starting to find out a little bit here. So Samuel says, until now, I've produced over 100 weekly episodes, but I need to shift my focus on the business side of my project. Last time I talked with my mastermind group, all the guys agreed that I have to reduce the frequency of publication. Due to this, I need to decide between a bi-weekly release or a seasonal podcast. In my opinion, a seasonal podcast is more interesting, but I fear the risk of losing my audience. Have you tried anything like this? What's your opinion on the topic? Huge, big, meaty, exciting, interesting topic. We can take it in a few ways, and I'm sure that we will. What's your initial thought here in response to Samuel's query?
Yes, no, maybe, it depends. Much with anything, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, at the end, have I tried anything like this? No, I haven't personally tried this. I've seen endless people now doing this, the season-based show. So, yes, it can absolutely be done. I haven't tried it. And I don't think you will lose subscribers because one thing, I just can't imagine somebody going through their phone and cleaning off subscriptions and you haven't been annoying them or anything. So they're probably not. If they like your show and at the end of the last show, you told them that you were going into seasons and that you'd be back in 3 months and you come back in 3 months, not in 6 months or whenever you feel ready, then I don't think people will unsubscribe on their phone. And that's how you lose a subscriber. They have to actively unsubscribe. And I think that usually happens when you start providing content that's no good. When you start just kind of phoning it in, right? And just because you're like, oh, you're tired. And that's when you're going to lose people, not when you say, okay, here's the reasons why I need to. I'm going to provide you better content. If I can do it in seasons, I will be back on December 23rd of 2015 at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and be back at exactly that time. Don't come back later at all, because then you'll lose them. But if you do what you say you're going to do and you do it well, they will not unsubscribe. People have no shortage of content to consume right now. That's not people's problem. People's problem is a shortage of good content that relates to them and resonates with them. And you're already thinking that maybe I think you're lacking in that because you don't have the passion to do it all the time, or the time, or the bandwidth, whatever that happens to be. But this is you thinking for your audience, which is what you have to do. Not thinking about yourself, thinking about your audience now, and thinking that they need the best content from me. They need my best work all the time. And how do you do that? You do that by giving them your undivided attention. And if you can't do that always in 100 or 200, go to the next 200 episodes, you have to do that in seasons and tell them about it. They won't unsubscribe. Come back the exact moment you say you're going to come back and knock it out of the park again, and tell them how long that time. I'm going to be back for 6 episodes and it's going to last 6 weeks or whatever it's going to be. Tell them and get them used to that. And that's just now the new season that they're used to. Obviously, you're going to drop in rankings as you disappear, perhaps, but you'll come back with all those subscribers and more, and probably way more, because your content will be revitalized, because you'll be revitalized and you'll be excited about doing it again and happy and have all that bandwidth to do it. So by all means, if you think this is something you need and this is something that your audience will benefit from, which I think they will by the way you're positioning the question, then by all means, go for it. Absolutely, absolutely go for it.
Agreed. And let me add this on top of that when it comes to seasons. I think, number one, there are obviously certain topics that will lend themselves more obviously to seasons than others. So, example, the Assembly Call podcast, that is very seasonal, right? Because it's based on basketball games and there's a season there. So there's kind of a natural season built in. I think most people aren't hosting a show like that, right? But there's still a way to do seasons. But I think it's important for those seasons to be themed some way, or to have some sort of beginning and end. Some sort of, whatever it is, give it something, as opposed to just, I'm here for 12 weeks, then I'm gone. I'm here for 12 weeks, then I'm gone. I think trying to be strategic about the journey you're going on. I think one of the reasons I like this idea of seasons, and that I think we're going to see more and more shows going to it, is because I think people are going to start viewing their shows more as competing with all the other media out there, as opposed to just a podcast competing with other podcasts. And that's how TV does it. That's how a lot of other mediums do it. But obviously, like a TV show is that's got a beginning and an end. And I think if you can do that with seasons, it's going to set you up even better to be more successful with it. Here's the other thing too, is I don't think you have to worry about losing the subscription. Clearly, I don't think people are just going to say, well, he hasn't been there for a month, let me go unsubscribe. They would be more likely to unsubscribe if you put out crap and they listen to it and they get angry and they say no more of this. But I do think that you risk losing a bit of the relationship with your audience. And that's why make sure that you've been getting people on an email list and have some regular communication. Let people know what you're up to in the meantime. Obviously, you may be doing seasons because you need to step back from the workload and all of that. But sending an email once a week or once every couple weeks or even once a month just to say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm really excited about, coming back in October, 1st, whatever it's going to be. I think it helps when you stop, if there's a point for when you're coming back, so people know what to look forward to. And I think if you can do those two things, give the season some kind of theme or overarching through line or something that puts it together so people feel like they're on a journey, and then maintain contact, maintain the connection, then I think that you don't have to worry so much about losing people while you're gone.
So do you mean actually sort of mapping out the next season, sort of the whole, not like a story arc, because most people are doing nonfiction based shows, but do you mean would you plan out your whole and thematically cover a whole subject?
I would try to. Something to where I think for seasons to work, look, I mean, I think seasons can work if you're just here for 16 episodes and then you're gone and then you come back. I think that can work. But I think you're going to have a better connection with your audience and keep people from one season to the next if they feel like they've gone somewhere, right? So like with the showrunner, I think if we ever want to do seasons, you know, right now, the way that we're doing our episodes, because it's every week and we have no endpoint in sight, we find an interesting topic that is hot in the discussion group or that we're thinking about, and we talk about it. If we were ever to go to seasons, I would think that we would want to be very strategic about, you know, maybe this season, you know, we're talking about developing your show, or this is a season about, you know, running your show, or whatever, like something to where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to the content. And I think that's going to be easier for some than others, and it may be a bit of a challenge, but I just think people will be more likely to come back when they think, hey, I'm going to go somewhere, as opposed to just random episodes. I don't think it's necessary, but I just think it's another way to get people to look forward to you when you come back.
Right. Yeah, it's because it seems daunting to me. If we had to like plan out 10 episodes in a row for the showrunner, it would be a lot of work. Like we'd really have to sit down and sort of map it out. So I guess I'm wondering if my answer actually is, do seasons before quitting your show. If that's sort of like, it's just too much. It's too much to do a weekly show. I can't do it with my whole other business and everything going on. So it's either that or quit. It's like, well, then no, you should definitely go to seasons. So if that's the overwhelm that we're dealing with, then of course. But then, like Jared says, if you want to do seasons right, then you probably have to have this plan, which is then a whole nother bunch of work, right? It really is I mean, when you're talking serial and those kind of things, but even Michael Hyatt now is doing seasons. And I don't know if he follows a theme, probably, because he goes sort of with like launches and different things going on, but he kind of takes away, it seems like, from other pieces of his content because he can't produce as much there because now he's producing episodes for his show. And so it kind of goes in cycles. And so it can feed all different sort of people who like to consume the different content. But
it's also important to remember, like, there's super incredible ideal way to do it and then acceptable way, you know, like obviously, yes, you know, having perfectly mapped out seasons would be great. But even if all you're doing is going to seasons to save time and it's just a random assortment of interviews, that's fine. That's still better than nothing.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
So there's different levels of it. And here's the other thing to remember too, especially if you've been going for a while and 100 episodes, you've got 100 weekly episodes, as long as they're not especially timely to where they're no longer relevant, reruns, rebroadcasts, you can do a season. And then, you know, you could schedule your old episodes to go back out. Just make sure they very clearly in the title say rerun or rebroadcast so that people who have listened to them don't waste their time listening again if they see the title and don't like it. But you can do reruns. And that kind of keeps you in there. It allows other people, you know, new people to find you. And maybe all you do then is record an episode. Hey, we're between seasons right now. This is a rerun. Get on the email list to find out when our new season launches, and we're going to be talking about X or, you know, whatever. It's all dependent on what you're doing. But again, it's about that journey. It's about the experience for the audience. And the more that you can do that and craft it and keep people feeling like it's moving forward, I think the better you're going to be. And the more they're going to be waiting for you to come back as opposed to finding you by happenstance when you come back just because you pop up in their feed again. And there's a different kind of anticipation to it. It's like when Mr. Robot comes back on TV, I will be there waiting. It's not like I'll just stumble upon the first episode by happenstance, you know?
I don't even know what that means, but it sounds awesome.
You didn't watch Mr. Robot?
No, but I want to. It's like just the name, like, wow. It was like, is he making this up as just like some show? Or is this...
No, and okay, and let me say this too. Because I've learned something really valuable lately, you know, and we talk about this idea of overwhelm, and we've talked a lot about the importance of, you know, maintaining your schedule, right, to stay top of mind. And, you know, I'm starting to wonder a little bit about that advice, and here's what I mean. You know, I posted that article that Seth Godin wrote about how many podcasts there are now, and no one can possibly listen to all the podcasts that they have. And yes, it's important if you have a weekly show to show up every week, but you don't want to show up with crap, right? It would probably be better to take a couple of weeks off, announce that you're doing that, why you're doing that, than show up with crap. You know, we've had the lead running for many, many weeks in a row. And, it just so happened that this past month really became a time crunch with other shows, other project, personal obligations, all this stuff. And, we did a recording and recorded these 3 episodes real quick. I didn't put a whole lot of planning into them. Even after we recorded them, I didn't think they were great. Like, I thought they were good, but I didn't think they were great. And we put them out there, and the feedback to them has not been good. And, there've been actually a few negative comments to them, which are the first negative comments that we've gotten on that show. And I think it's indicative of not trusting my gut when it was like, hey, we're kind of going through the motions on this just to fill a time slot. And the value of showing up every week is not enough to overcome if it's not quality and if you're wasting people's time by not giving them something new and good and worthwhile. And so I think you've always got to weigh that. I don't think we did right by our audience with those episodes. And I think we're and we'd already been planning this to kind of shift how we're handling that show, just to adjust for, how the realities of our work responsibilities have changed since we started hosting it, to make it a little more flexible, a little bit easier to prepare for, be able to bring more people in and kind of share the workload. And these are all really important decisions that we have to make that Samuel alludes to there, where it's, at some point, yes, we all want to do these shows and we want to be perfect and we want to put all this time into them, but it's still got to work out to a business end. There's got to be, we have to balance that. And sometimes business considerations come before the show. And I think when that happens, we want to be smart about figuring out the best amount of quality we can give without just trying to fill a time slot and putting out something that's not good, because that will hurt you more than even not showing up will hurt you, I think. And I'm not sure we've been clear enough about that with what we've said. But I definitely think that's true.
That's interesting. I was really hoping, as you were saying that story about the lead, that you were going to turn around and say that you thought they weren't good, but then the feedback was that they were good. Because it was different.
No, they were not good. I mean, they were not good episodes. And, look, I mean, I think, and we talk about creating a remarkable experience, and I don't think that we did that there. And I think sometimes we can get really caught up in what we're doing, and that will happen. I don't, being a showrunner is not about being perfect, but I do think it is about recognizing when maybe you've put something out that isn't your best and adjusting, not doing the same thing because you're going to keep giving your audience the same result, but listening to their feedback, listening to your gut instinct, adjusting and making it better the next time. So,
yeah, that's interesting. So, I'm trying to just think of this because we can't always show up every week and be on top of our game, want to do it, or you know what I mean? Like there are times where like your like energy levels for doing this can drop. But as I've said, and I know because I mean now I'm on a schedule with advertisers, I need to put out a show. I still have to kind of push it through, right? It's the whole war of art where you have to just kind of put your butt in the chair and do the work. How do you write? You sit and you write. How do you podcast? You sit and you podcast. So how do you weigh that? How do you know when it's like you sit down, it's like, oh, I just can't come up with a show today. Like, do you just, oh, no show? Or that's a hard thing to weigh, isn't it? Like, is this something where, and it's hard because I would have said, follow your gut, but you didn't. And it turned out to not work for you. But these are the things we go through, right? These are the things we all go through with these shows, especially when we start going up high volume. It's, I mean, multiple shows per week. Like you do what, 2 shows, 3 shows, 4 shows now? How many shows are you doing right now?
5. Is anybody else having issues with Johnny's audio, or is that just me? Try talking again real quick.
Hey.
Yeah, something's going on with your audio. It's all weird. It's like you're talking into one of those voice modulator things.
That's not good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I'm doing 5 shows. And I guess I don't regret putting an episode out there per se because I wanted to fill that commitment. And I think part of it is accepting that every now and then we are going to put something out there that isn't the best. And hopefully our audience is honest with us in their reaction and will tell us. I think it's a sign of a good, healthy relationship with your audience when you can be honest with them and they will be honest with you, tell you what they like and what they don't, and still show up and trust that you'll get it corrected if it wasn't, your best. And that's kind of where I thought that we were, with the lead. And I think the fact that we've been there for so many weeks in a row, putting out good content, I think that builds up some trust. You have a little bit in that trust bank to where if you stumble a little bit, people will give you some leeway and you keep going. But I think it is important on our part to recognize when we aren't doing our best. And we've got to make a change somewhere. For us, it's figuring out a little bit of a different format that we can more reliably fill with great content, which obviously we weren't able to do there. So those are my thoughts there. Any other thoughts on this topic before we hop on to another one?
I'm just wondering if my audio is working.
It's better now.
Is it?
It's not perfect, but it's better. It's not scratchy.
Not scratchy?
Like you're
not perfect?
Ask me to take me to your leader or anything anymore. So,
can I take you to my leader?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Let's. All right. Is Chris here? Let me open up a seat here. We're going to try this. Is Chris here? Because if Chris is here, then I want him to be able to come in and explain his question. So we've opened up this seat. Chris, if you want it, come take it. Let me quickly preview his question. So Chris says, I would love to go from every other week to once a week shows. My fear is maintaining consistency. I get a reasonable number of guests from referrals by current guests. I guess it won't be fatal if I miss a week, so I should just bust my ass to find more guests. I'd love to hear suggestions about finding more guests. I'm unlikely to use a VA, but if I did go that route, how do I prep that person to find the right people? And by the way, I've tried reaching out to some people directly on social media, but got no response, not even a thank you, or not even a no thank you. Otherwise, I've only had one person turn me down because his boss wouldn't let him. So Chris wants to go the other way. He wants to go from every other week to once a week shows, fears maintaining consistency, some of the stuff that we've just talked about. So it's interesting to get the counter goals here from Samuel and Chris. So let's see. If Chris is here, he can try and unlock the seat. But in the meantime, we'll talk about this. So, Johnny, let me go to you on this. You're obviously the most qualified person at this Blab table to discuss this because you do 3 interviews a week. What's your advice on, and especially, do you use your VA or any of your assistants to help you find guests?
Yes.
What do you got for Chris?
Every week I get emailed a list of 35 potential guests with links to their stuff. I go through it and then I respond back and tell her who I want to reach out to. But you don't have as many to do, so you don't have to go on volume. So you could do this yourself. And I think, Chris, you just have to be creative. Like, who's your ideal guest? And like, where else are these people being interviewed, perhaps? Like, is there magazines, like a trade magazine that exists? Are there other websites? There has to be a place where you can find these people. I don't actually know who your guests are, so it's hard. But with only one a week, it's really shouldn't be that hard. And then, like you said, with asking a guest for referrals, that's obviously an amazing way to do it, which I also do. And then that kind of spreads and starts to really help after a while. So I would just really think either from bookstores or like books that have been written in your field or magazines or any websites or forums. There's going to be people that are like the experts and the leaders in your field. And those are the people you want to interview. You just have to track them down. Luckily, we have Google at our fingertips, and you can literally, I bet you for almost any market that you're in, you could sit down for 2 hours on Saturday morning or Sunday morning and with just the computer in front of you and just start doing searches. Search through Amazon, search through iTunes, search through Google, and just literally start a spreadsheet. Just don't even, like a brainstorm, don't even like, well, is this person right for me? Just any information and links you can get to their site, and then, or else just their names, and just start a big list. And then eventually go through that list and whittle it down to people you want to reach out to. It's not, I'm sure if you find 12 people, that's what, 4 months worth of, or 3 months worth of guests for you. And then you ask those 12 people for referrals, it's going to, it kind of just spreads and snowballs. But because you have such a small amount, like to me, it's a small amount of guests because it's a third of what I need to do. So it shouldn't be that hard. And it's, I don't think I'm in such a different market that, I mean, obviously there's a lot of experts in my market, but I think there is in every market. And you really just, it comes to a point where you just have to sit down and just start that brainstorm and just come up with as many names as you can. And then maybe the following Saturday, then go through them and sort of do more research on each, see if they'd be a good fit. But really, as so much of it is, it's just really putting your butt in the chair and doing the work. And just, I mean, we have Google at our fingertips and Twitter and iTunes and Amazon. The biggest search engines in YouTube, right, that have ever been in the history of mankind.
You know, to be fair, you are interviewing entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs do like talking about themselves. So it may be a little bit simpler to find folks in your market, perhaps, than in Chris's. Maybe, you know.
But I mean, if I was in the health industry, or if I was in science, you know what I mean? Those are all massive industries.
But they may not be.
The diet industry,
but they may not be people who are selling stuff. You know, like I mean, and you can disagree with this, but don't you think a lot of your people, they have sites to promote or books to sell or things, reasons why they would be going on a show, whereas some people who, because we have a lot of people in the course that are in, you know, that's, I think Chris's show deals with the life sciences, you know, and so I think if they're not selling anything, then it may be a little bit harder for them to justify taking the time out to do it. And so maybe it's a little bit, maybe you have to sell the interview a little bit more, sell the reason to come on.
Yes, but the first step is finding the person to sell the interview to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure if you go to Amazon and type in life sciences, I'm sure that a book comes up, or possibly 25, or maybe 100 books. Do you know what I mean? Like people write books like crazy now. People write articles, and like they don't have to they're not promoting necessarily a business, but sort of everybody is like in the personal branding. I mean, people sell millions of dollars in courses teaching everybody else how to create brands out of their market. I'm assuming, you know, I understand that obviously business, everybody's got a business. That's why they're in the business field. But I don't think that's, I mean, if that's the case, then okay, well, you have no guess.
Well, it's interesting.
You know what I mean?
You know, I wonder sometimes if we're insulated in some ways, you know, because we do shows with and for people who are interested in shows. You know, like the Showrunner is about podcasting. It'd be easy for us to get guests about podcasting, like people who are outside of the internet world. You know, and people who are trying to run shows for that market and need people from that market to talk. I can see how it would be a little bit more of a challenge. You know, like we don't have to sell people on why you should come onto a podcast because everybody in our world gets it. But I just wonder if other people that aren't in that world have an even more difficult time even selling the idea of why you would come on a podcast in the first place.
They didn't get it 5 years ago or 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And I mean, there was podcasts back then. People had to make you understand what a podcast even was. And still people, all I'm saying is it's the whole mindset of you have to just kind of do it. You might have to work harder than me. You're probably right. You probably have to do the selling but you still have to find those people. Yeah. And really those people are at our fingertips, and with a cup of coffee, sitting down, spreadsheet, and just find the people and then reach out to them, phone them if you want. If these people are like in a market that's totally old school, they don't even deal with email very well, then find their phone number. Phone them. But I mean, you can interview people through their cell phone now. Like they can get Skype on here and they think they're having a conversation on a phone, but you're recording it for a podcast. That they have no idea what that is, but they might be really, really smart.
Let me add this too. Chris says in here that his fear is maintaining consistency. And this is, again, where I would just remind you, Chris, and remind everybody else who has an archive. If you're going to go from this every other week to a week, that can be daunting because now you've got double the space to fill. So there's two things that I would do. And frankly, I need to take my own advice on this, and we should probably plan this out for the Showrunner and for the lead as well, is go back into the archive, make a list of the 5 shows that you would rebroadcast if you had to rebroadcast them. And that way, if you really struggle one week, you just can't have a guest, you know, your show is on Wednesday and it's Tuesday night and you're like, holy crap, what am I supposed to do? You've got your game plan because you just go to the top of that list and you rebroadcast an episode. Or you think about maybe 4 or 5 topics that you could get on there and have a monologue about for maybe 8 to 12 minutes if you're comfortable doing that. Something like what we've done with the Showrunner short, but you would put it out as an episode, be a good chance for your audience to get to know you a little bit, give them a little something different. And that way, again, and this is, you know, to help assuage that fear of maintaining the consistency, now you've got some content in your back pocket and more importantly, a game plan. So you're not looking for interviews out of a sense of desperation. You're looking for interviews out of a sense of finding the best match for your audience. Because if you're desperate, you might take anybody. it might not, you might not come at it from the right way. But if you've got this other plan, like, oh yeah, I'll just rebroadcast a great interview from the past, or I'll do this, that, or the other. And that is not failing your audience. It's not, failing in any way. In fact, it's something we should all do more of because our audience turns over so much. So that's just always advice I want to give, because I give it to you as much as to myself, because I always forget about how powerful the archives are. And right now we've got tons of episodes, of the Showrunner that we could rebroadcast and would be really valuable for all the new people that we have listened to the show. So at some point we'll stop, having to hear our own voice every week talk, and we'll put another one of those old episodes out there. So great question though, Chris.
Yeah, it is a great question. And yeah, I hope we're not coming off as just because I am in the business space. But I think if I was entering any space, I would do the same hard work. And it was hard when I first started to come up with the names. I had to do a lot of research because I didn't want the same old names. But I had to just sit down and just start. And I created lists of hundreds of people. It's what I did. And it took me a lot of time to do. But I mean, once you have those names, you can interview them over the next couple of years if you want. So it's really worth it. Plus, I love sitting in front of my computer drinking coffee. So it works.
Do you do anything without drinking coffee? Like every time we're getting ready to do something, you're getting a cup of coffee.
Very little. Yeah. Very little.
Okay, let's and what you said there about hard work, I mean, ultimately that's what it always comes down to with podcasting. It's just being willing to do the work and being able to sit in the chair and just do it. There's never any substitute for that. So which makes this next question interesting. That's a great segue to Sally's question. Sally, I know you're here. Quick question. Do you want to come on and talk about this, or you want us to ask your question? Because the seat is open. So,
sure.
Okay, here comes Sally. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yes. This is awesome.
This is awesome. All right, so
I got to have a drink of coffee.
Hey,
shocker.
Yes.
Sally,
Yes.
How are you?
Hi. Great to be on, guys.
Oh, wow. This is awesome.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. Look at Sally already getting all those props. She's going to be past us in no time.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sally, do you want to explain to us? I'm happy to read your question if you'd like me to, or you can just let us know what you're thinking and let's talk about this, because it's a great question.
Well, I came in and had a lot of trouble getting on, and so I don't know if you touched anything on it in the first few minutes, but
we haven't yet.
Yeah, I feel like I could live my whole work life around the podcast, because there's the exciting quest for speakers. There's then really backgrounding myself on the speaker. There's getting ready for the interview, preparing myself, doing the interview. That's kind of all the fun part. And then because I want quality, I go into the editing, and that's the deep hole, that can take, like half my weekend. I feel like a geek, what'd you do on your weekend? I edited my podcast. And then I get to the end and I think, but dang, I have to promote it, and I'm running out of time by then. So I was interested in how you kind of parcel out what's most important, because maybe I can't do it all. And then the other thing is, I'm just looking for efficiencies. Do I lower the bar? Or, I know I'm sort of on the learning curve, so I still have a lot more mistakes to make once, in the process. But I really can't be spending 10 hours an episode. It's like a little crazy.
Let me ask you one quick question, which will help us with our answers. What is your goal for your show? Like, what are you ultimately hoping to get out of the show?
That's a great question, because I'm not selling anything directly, and so that's part of what's. I'm looking to create authority, and I'm looking to connect with thought leaders in my field. I'm looking to eventually get speaking gigs. I'm looking to create a platform of authority. Down the line, that might lead to a workshop or a product, but right now I'm just like immersed in the podcasting, finding my own voice, what I have to contribute, and what this is all about.
So let me offer two real quick things here, and then I want to get John's insight on them, because they're actually things that he'll know about. Number one is, I would say I would look for opportunities where you can outsource. Now, it's going to depend on if you have the resources to do it and if that would be worth it to you. But it could be to where outsourcing some of the production really makes some sense. Yeah. And I'd love to get some of Johnny's thoughts on that, because he's actually done it. I haven't done it with my personal shows, but we do it on Rainmaker FM, and it's a lifesaver. And it's been well worth it. But obviously with the Showrunner, we have a business model tied to it. So we've been able to obviously make up for those expenses. Here's the other thing I would say is that as I have felt so much like you, and I feel like that with my shows, especially the ones on the side where there are always 10 things that could be done. There's only ever enough time to do 5 of them or maybe 3 of them. And I think the biggest efficiency I added is worrying less about editing to quote unquote perfection, because I used to spend a lot of time, again, editing out ums and editing out and trying to make it sound perfect. And I found that not only did I save time, but my connection with the audience actually went up when I was more myself in, whatever good parts there are and whatever bad parts there are that come out when obviously there's some stuff you have to take out, right? But that really helped me because like on the lead, those episodes, when I was editing those, I would literally spend 2 to 3 hours editing every one to take out all of those little, yeah, I know. Exactly. And that overwhelmed me so much. And when I stopped doing that, just let it happen, it freed me up to prepare more and just to have more time to do other stuff. There's no way I could do the showrunner if I was also still spending that much time on the lead. Now again, we outsource the production for that, so it's not as big a deal. But I made that change before when I was editing it myself. So those would be the 2 areas that I would say to start with. In addition to simply understanding what is the most important activity that you have for each show where you get the biggest bang for the buck, and always make sure that that comes first before the other stuff. Because if you have some clarity there, it at least helps you to know that when stuff gets left on the side that you can't do, at least you know you did the most important stuff first.
Yeah. The other thing I think is because of my learning curve, there are so many things that sort of have gone wrong with the audio on the way in. So it's like, when Skype does that froggy thing for 10 seconds and they go, oh, I can't do that. Or when, I'm trying to learn everything to turn off, and I'm getting better at that. But then there'll be differences in voice levels. So I've been trying to understand the tech part of, okay, if their voice is here and my voice is here or their voice is here, that's going to look weird. So I have to go through and adjust it all. So I'm ready to give up on the ums and the all rights, but the other stuff, it feels like I do kind of long form interviews, and I don't think people will want to listen to them if the audio isn't at a certain standard,
Mm-hmm.
Well, the audio quality, meaning the original recording, has to be at a certain level. But the rest of it, I have not edited something out of one of my conversations in, I'm going to say 50 episodes. Like no no stutter, no anything gets taken out. I know because I have these sheets that I made, and on the top they have a spot where I would put edits down, and I mark a time if it happens that I have to edit out. I'm actually going to remove that edit section from that sheet because and the more you leave in, the more natural, the more ums, the more uhs, the more stutters, the more your audience will appreciate it. It's like they're sitting in on a conversation with you. Like if they sit with you, have a conversation. Well, I know if my friends sit with me and have coffee, that I'm going to say I'm going to say I'm going to try and think off the top of my head, and it might take a little while sometimes.
Even if somebody is a big ummer, like they every sentence, that kind of ummer, you would still.
I don't even listen for it anymore.
Okay.
Unless they're self-conscious about it and they ask you specifically to take it out, which I have never had in the 160 episodes I've done now. Right. People have never asked for that. And I tell people, like, if you say something and you want it taken out after, by all means, tell me. Don't worry about it during the episode. Never. They never say it. It's people, I don't think we notice. I think we notice if it's too sterile. Yeah. We don't notice if there's too many ums because we all say all the time. I mean, the biggest of the shows out there, listen to like Tim Ferriss talking, and they're the most nonchalant conversations you've ever heard. There's so many ums, there's so many uhs, there's so many curses, there's things dropping on tables. All yeah, but you get 100,000 downloads an episode because people love it. It's real. It's a real conversation. Podcasts are supposed to be, it's like I get to sit at a table with you and your guest. And that's awesome. It shouldn't be all where you can hear it. It's like, I know they cut something out there, like an was there.
So John, walk me through this one piece of what do you do? You're sitting down and you have 5 minutes of pre-time with your guests. How do you use that time to make sure you're going to have the top quality audio? Like how much adjusting, how much fiddling with volumes and levels and whatever's.
I don't have any way to adjust volumes or levels except for on my end, but I just have these headphones in.
Yeah.
First thing, it's like, oh, you sound like we have a bad connection. I'm going to call you back on Skype in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Hang up, call them right back. Oh, much better connection. Or else if it's, and actually this week I turned somebody down for the second time because he's actually in Costa Rica right now, and it was so bad, his connection, because when he plugged his mic in, there was some USB issue, but he can't get a new mic for a couple of months till he gets back to the States. And I was just like, I said, you have a great story to tell, but my audience is going to hate it. Because just when we're not talking, it's like, well, we can't do this.
And for example, if we weren't live right now, like if we were just getting ready for a Showrunner recording, I would probably tell Johnny to fix his audio levels because
Is it still that bad?
You're maxing out. You know, so like, so wow. you can typically hear if it's going to be really bad. You know, ever since you had that issue, you've been maxing out a little bit, and so you can kind of tell that stuff and just kind of make sure so you can adjust those as you go. I would ask this too. You know, the other two things that really helped me get more out of the time I was putting in are, number one, just having templates. Templates in GarageBand so that I can just, plop my audio in and I'm not adjusting a whole bunch of stuff. That helped. And I actually do a lot with text expanders because I found that for show notes and for, blog posts and for all this stuff, I end up kind of typing in the same formatted stuff all the time. So I have a little text expander. Like, for example, when I'm doing a Primality post, I'll type in primer post into my little Rainmaker post edit screen, and it fills in everything. Like, I've got a little open center, close center tag, and I know I can just post the YouTube video in there. And I've got it all, so I just have to go fill in the blanks. And instead of having to think about, wait, what goes here, what goes there, template it all, text expander. And because that stuff, not only does it take time, it takes mental energy. And now that's time I'm not spending prepping for my show and doing whatever. And those little things, which I didn't figure out until doing this for 2 or 3 years, have helped a ton. And so any little efficiencies like that really, really add up on over the days to help you out.
So what's a text expander?
So I use a program for the Mac called aText. And what it does is you can put in whatever you're going to type, right? And you want it to be something you don't type normally. So like for me, it's primer post, and then it fills in my template for the post or, whatever it is. And I just have a whole bunch of things that when I type it, it expands into this big, long thing of text for repeatable type things. So that way you don't have to go find it and copy paste it, which just takes more steps, or try and rethink it or recreate it again.
It's an app, right?
Yeah, like I think I have to pay for it, but it's worth gold.
You can use it in email, you can use it in social media, you can use it in like your writing. But templates, definitely. Templates, every single one of my blog posts looks exactly like every single blog post or show notes post on rainmaker.fm because we follow the format. And also now I've got it so that the intro I say for my guest is actually the exact intro that is at the top of my show notes. Literally a verbatim. I use it, I read it, and then I copy paste it over to the tip. You have to kind of optimize these things, and don't think that like, well, someone's going to notice that that's the exact same. Like, people don't care. They don't notice, and they're not paying as much attention to us as we are to our own stuff. They're really not. So it's that, and then I take my notes. And as I'm going, so I literally, from those notes, I know if I have to include any links in the show notes. As I do it, I can just look at my sheet, and then notes, I'll pick 3 of them and I'll make a bullet point, and that's it. It's done. And so it literally, to do my show notes takes me less than 10 minutes because the work is already done for doing the show. And then I also have an editor, obviously, for my audio at this point, which I didn't always have, but to me, it helped because he doesn't worry about the ums and ahs, and I could tell him to do that, but I couldn't. I can tell you to do that, but I couldn't do it myself either. I had to because when it was myself, it was like, no, I can just take out a couple more. But I've learned that my audience has blown up, and my audience likes it a lot more now than then, and we leave everything in now. So the data to me doesn't lie. People like a natural sounding conversation.
Oh. So how much time do you spend on promotion? Or are you guys at that point where you don't need to promote anymore? Your guests can just do the promotion for you?
I spend so little, except for, this is where it's confusing, right? Like, what's promotion? Like, I don't promote a specific episode really at all anymore. I mean, I tweet it out it goes out as a tweet when it's posted, but it doesn't really bring traffic. But I mean, I go on. If I've never said no to somebody who's asked me to be on their podcast, I never stop mentioning my show places like here. You know what I mean? Like, so that it's being promoted. My show is being promoted by me getting out there. Like somebody asked me the other day, it was like, how much time in your week is devoted to podcasting? And it's like, well, that's a tricky question because it's probably only about 10 hours to my actual show. But the whole rest of my week, which is a ton, is all me out there doing other stuff to get people back to my show. But it's not like me trying to figure out a way to post my episode to Facebook in a new way. It's literally me going out and promoting in any way that I can and trying to get myself on other shows, trying to get so I can write on other people's blogs, trying to get into people's books, all those things, because those are all things that are going to promote my show. So not on an individual episode basis. I used to focus a lot of time on that, but I didn't see the results. Like, I didn't see things come back in a big way. It's when you promote yourself and your show, then people want to find you. Then people start typing in Sally into iTunes and finding you because that's who they're looking for. That's when your show really starts to take off. So that's how I spend my time doing it.
And I would agree. Like, I think there's a lot of, there's some auto promotion that happens, like scheduling tweets at the same time and doing some of that. And then, it's like, what is promotion? It's like for the assembly call, I spend 2 hours during the game live tweeting the game, which is all technically promotion for the show. But I actually think rather than thinking about promoting the show, if I could only do one, I would spend more time building and working on my relationships with current audience members. So for example, like the Monday newsletter that I send out for Primality, I consider that, just nurturing my relationship with the audience. And I think when I build that better relationship, they're more likely to share it. And what they do sharing it, to me, if I have a limited amount of time, I would rather build a relationship that encourages them to share, because that will be a bigger payoff than what I could get going out and doing some promotion on my own. Because I'm not at the point with that show where I'm going to, pay for promotion. I don't have real sophisticated funnel set up for it, or anything. Obviously, it's a little different for the showrunner and the lead because the power of the Rainmaker FM network really helps us out. And we have the opportunity to go write a post on Copyblogger if we want to, really promote an episode, which isn't, the most, that experience, not a lot of people can relate with because they don't have that opportunity.
And I didn't have that for the first, 8 months of my show, but that's literally how I got found, right, by Rainmaker, was doing my show. But you're right, the whole newsletter thing, that email and building that relationship, I don't know how I missed that part of it, because that's a huge portion. That's probably at least 30 to 40% of my week is working on a newsletter, the once a week email that I send out, and responding to every single email I get as thoroughly as I can, and to every tweet and to every message I get on Facebook, because I'm asking for them. And those are my people. Those are the people then that go out and promote an episode that they like and do it. And to have somebody else promoting an episode for you or your show works way better than you doing it. But by you building a relationship, that's what works, right? I mean, that's really, truly what works. To me, you want to minimize the actual time you spend doing the actual production of your show. Find as many templates and as many things as you can, and start to just give up the fact of perfection, make it really, really good. And then after that, spend all your time going out and just getting one person at a time. Don't worry about 100 at a time. Don't worry about 1,000 at a time. Literally one. That whole one is better than zero, right? Find one person, make a connection with them. And then from there, go to the next person. And those people will be your advocates. They will go out there and they will, I mean, as Samuel says, you're your best advocate. And so you have to advocate for yourself and your show on a personal level. And then those people will go out there more and more and more and do it for you. But this is on a big, your brand and your show, not per episode.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. That's a great distinction. Yeah.
Sally, thank you for being bold and stepping up and sharing your story with us and your questions. This was great.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Absolutely. All righty. Perfect. See, this is fun. This is why we gotta keep doing these as Blabs. Keep having people on. It's fun. Plus, look at all the props.
Sally.
She's gonna have double the props of both of us combined.
Yeah, well, she deserves way more than that.
Just stay, Sally. People will just keep.
Yeah, you don't want to leave. You want to collect these.
So real quick, we got about 10 minutes left.
This is like you pulled the arm in it.
How do I say goodbye here? Do you take me off? Or?
Yeah, we'll X you out. Thanks, Sally.
Bye. Thank you.
It brings up a little window that says, "Are you sure you want to kick this person?" I don't want to. It's not so violent. No, I want to. Yeah, I want to say a pleasant goodbye. I don't want to kick her. Okay.
Thanks, Sally. That was fun.
All right. I want to get to this question from Louisa. And she has another technical question. We may not have a chance to get to that, but I sent that to Toby, so he can probably give us some help with that one. But here's a really good question. So I will pose this to you, Mr. Naster. Tips for leading interviews when the interviewee goes on to elaborate details or just goes off on some kind of tangent and you don't know how to bring him or her back gently without sounding too abrupt. Anybody who's done an interview show has faced this. There's the people who just give you 5-word answers and you can't get them talking enough. And then there's the people who just go and go and go and sometimes veer outside of maybe what you kind of wanted the interview to be. How do you handle that?
Yeah, this is really hard. And you have to, I think, as casual as you want your conversation to be, you have to be somewhat aggressive. I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but you have to stay in control at all times of the conversation. That's your job. And that actually sometimes involves you actually just cutting them off. Like literally just finding a spot and be like, okay, but you're not quite answering the question. So could you tell me this and then restate the question and kind of people will be, oh, and then.
So right now, if I felt you were just going on too long, what I just did to jump in, now I've regained control. Like you would do that? Because I just interrupted you.
It's a real. Is it interrupting or is it like when you're sitting with your friend at a coffee shop having a conversation and they're saying something that even excites you, you sometimes jump right in. Yeah. We want to just sit there and be like, I'm going to be the proper listener. Which of course I tell you to listen and do all that, but sometimes you have to take. It's your show, and you remember are the only voice that your audience has is you, and you have to be there to when your audience is like, oh my goodness, just stop. You have to be like, okay, no, this has to stop. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through the whole process and then not even release it because it's going to be crap for your audience. You have to just step up and kind of just bring them back. And then you really, to me, listen to interviews, listen to good interviewers, right? I mean, and you can see people do this. And you'll learn how to do it. Or you can listen to somebody like James Altucher, who literally I just cut you off. That's it. But you have to answer this question, which it's his show. He can do that. But you do have to have that casual, like I love having a casual conversation, but I really kind of like pump myself up before my interviews because I want to be in control. And I demand that I'm in control of the conversation because my audience demands it of me, because we're trying to get to a certain level in a certain amount of time. And so we can't just have it go off. It doesn't work. You have to be willing to do that. And this is one of those things that's going to take practice. You'll get that weird feeling in your stomach. It's like, oh, I'm going to interrupt and this is going to be awkward. And it is going to be super awkward, but do it. By the 5th time, it's like, yeah, that's not bad. By the 10th time, and then all of a sudden, you're going to learn how to control a conversation. And you're going to go to like a party, and you're going to see people around you who you notice, like, wow, this person's really good at controlling a conversation how they want. And it's a really cool skill to have, but it really takes practice. But you do have to do that for your audience. You absolutely, absolutely have to do this for your audience. It's essential.
We got a Johnny rant on this one. I was wondering if it was going to come 55 minutes in. All right, so let me ask you this. Let's say that you disagree with something that your guest says. Like you just blatantly disagree with them. What do you do there? Like, do you say that you disagree? Do you, will you take that and kind of get into an argument a little bit? Or where's the line between respecting what they're saying, respecting their place as a guest, but also, not wanting to either misinform or, frankly, miss an opportunity for the kind of tension that can make an interview really interesting?
Right. And I haven't actually had that where I've actually disagreed in that way, but I've had in several instances where the person has completely, like politician style, avoided my question and answered it. And then I've kind of interrupted them after like a minute or two of it and been like, okay, so you've completely prefaced, and I've actually said this to people, you've completely avoided my question, but I don't want the answer of what should everybody do. And this is like verbatim what I say. It's like, I want to know what you do, because we all know what we should do. The goal is here to tell me what you actually do, because I know that it's not what you should do. And then they're like, oh, okay. And it's okay, fine. And then they'll tell me the answer. And those are when you get to those answers. But you're just having a casual conversation with someone. Like you really should be, right? And you shouldn't be afraid to kind of bring them back. And you can laugh about it if you want. It's like, dude, you're totally going around my question. Can you just answer my, and people, they might laugh, and then you'll get to where you need to get to. It's do it how you have to, but you have to stay in control. You have to push it, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and get that weird feeling in your stomach that, oh, I have to do this. But you'll start to really enjoy it, and your conversations will get better. Your audience will appreciate it. That'll make you more confident in it, and your show will do better, and you will become a better interviewer.
So what would you say to someone who maybe doesn't feel that comfortable doing that, and maybe would not even want to do an interview show because they're not comfortable with that kind of control? You know, what would you say to someone like that?
You and the guest are the only two people who ever hear the conversation. And so if you started the whole process of booking them the way I tell you to, which is to preface it by the fact that only certain of my interviews get released and published, then it doesn't matter. It's totally, there's like, all you have to lose is 30 minutes or 45 minutes of your life to have a good conversation with somebody. Mm-hmm. And not all conversations go well. I mean, if we think back to like our dating days, if some of us aren't in that still, but you think back to that, not all first dates go really well. This is kind of what you're on. You're on this. Sometimes the conversations go bang on, just like, yes, yes, yes. And you hit these things off, right? And other times it's just like, wow, man, I would never want to sit down with her and talk to her again. It's just kind of how it is. And that's totally fine. It can't work with everybody. And we're not in front of live TV, so we don't have to make it work every single time. So if things start to go really bad, let's just stop right now. How about you can do that too? So there's no pressure, right? Like there really isn't. Like you just put that aside and put that into a folder on your desktop that's never release episodes. There you go. Like, what's the pressure? You learned from it probably, and you probably had somewhat of fun because you knew there was no pressure. So that's it.
Do we do ourselves a disservice by calling these interview shows instead of calling them conversation shows? Because I think interview inherently places pressure on you as the interviewer to lead a good conversation, to come up with great questions. But when you talk about it like that, and when you think about it like that, like, oh, it's just a conversation, now that pressure's kind of gone and you just talk. And I just wonder, like, maybe our terminology is even wrong. And I'm not saying, obviously, for the audience, that's what they know them as. They know them as interview shows. But the way that we talk, the way we phrase things can really frame our perception of them. Maybe we should start thinking about them instead of interview shows, think of them as conversation shows. And we should start referring to them as that here on the Showrunner.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Because people outside of our little tiny weird world we live in, you hear like, oh, I have to go do an interview. They're like, oh, you're getting a new job or you're hiring somebody? It's like, yeah, I do 3 of these a week though. But it's like, well, have you ever been hired? It's like, no, I've been like 200 interviews now. Still, nobody's hired me. So you know what I mean? So you're right. That could actually be it. And they are but to me, the problem is sometimes when it's too much of a conversation and then, well, we don't have to keep control of it. We don't have to have questions. We don't have to put any work into it. And I dislike that so much. You have to put work into it. You have to make it mean something, and you have to be wanting to engage and keep that control. That's a conversation still, but it needs to be something. You need to educate, you need to inspire, you need to entertain. You got to get that out of your guest. That's your job as the host. And if that's too much for you to handle, then you probably shouldn't be in that game. But it was too much almost for me to handle when I started. I was no good at it. But I just pushed through and did it until I learned how to do it. So you can do that. It takes time. But you have to do that for your audience. You do. And that's why when it's conversation, sometimes we get too wishy-washy and just, well, whatever, we'll let it roll for 3 hours until this person maybe answers my question. Like, that's not helping anybody, right?
Where do you stand on, and we have to wrap up soon, but I'm curious about this. and this is probably less for a straight interview show and more for a panel type show, like the Assembly Call show that I host, and even this right here, where if we simply agree on everything, it can be interesting, it can be informative, but it's not as compelling of a show. And I wonder, and I'm asking this because I struggle with this sometimes, where do you stand on asking a question or taking a point that is much more devil's advocate? Maybe it's not perfectly reflective of how you feel, but it will lead to a more energetic conversation. It'll get some juices flowing because it's a different perspective, and it gives the other person a differing perspective to argue against instead of your own, which is the same, and can kind of add a little bit of conflict, add a little bit of tension, even if it's slightly manufactured. Is that worth doing? Is it not worth doing because it might give a different perception of your own point that you want? Curious what you think on that, because I found sometimes I need to do that on shows I host to keep them moving and to even get the other people energized, to give them something else to argue against and discuss against, and to give the audience a better show. I mean, because part of it is keeping people engaged.
Yeah, you're right. And I haven't done it necessarily devil's advocate, but if somebody starts getting to like, here's my win, here's what I did awesome, here's what I did great, then it's like, okay, so what about the time when you were doing this and it totally like backfired on you? And then it's like, oh, okay, so maybe I was painting too rosy of a picture. Now let's go. And so you can kind of knock them off, right? Like there's like something, I forget what it's called, but there's like a psychological thing you can do. You kind of knock them off their pattern. To then it's all of a sudden like, oh, they come back to the conversation and they don't just, sometimes we get into a routine where we're just answering. And so you're definitely right. In my format, I don't really leave room to all of a sudden like play devil's advocate on something, but I will make them go to the opposite side if they're too positive or if they're just like constantly negative. And I also like structure my questions so that I'm asking for like a win and I'm asking for like a failure. I'm asking for a story, then I'm asking for a win. I'm not like, so what's your failure? What are you terrible at? What are you no good at? What's the worst thing you like, you know what I mean? Like by the end, the person's like, oh my God, I'm horrible at business. I shouldn't like, so you have to think about those things and pattern it sort of. It's like a story arc, right? You got to kind of build people up. And then especially at the end, I leave my guest with the question that makes them feel so good about themselves. And then that's how like I end up in books because they feel at the end of it, they're just like, oh my God, John's the greatest. And I didn't even do it. They just got to talk about themselves in the most positive light and they love it. And then these things, I end up here because of it. Mm-hmm. So there's these ways, right? It's just, so I don't know if that answers your question at all. You should have cut me off and said, John, you're not answering my question, but.
No, it's good. I mean, I think that's a perfectly good answer.
And I've had you do that to me, the devil's advocate thing, mm-hmm. and it works really well. I mean, you do it really, really, really well. So I would think that, yeah, that's totally right. But I can't seem to bring myself to do it or to fit it into my show. So that's the whole thing, right? You got to kind of figure out what works for you and what that whole thing you're trying to bring, that transformation you're trying to make your audience go through during your episode. Mm-hmm. And mine doesn't allow for that. It just allows me to really wins, losses, wins, story, wins, finale. And then a lesson. And then the person's like, wow, they get that whole journey of an entrepreneur right there in 30 minutes. And that's their win. Yeah. So every show's different, right? So try, test, listen to every story, every show you watch. Think like every 30-minute or 20-minute episode of a show, watch it and think like, how could this be like a podcast? Story arcs are or Google, it's like a story. Is it like the Story Triangle or something by Dan Harmon from Community? He has this article published somewhere. It's amazing. And it's literally like explaining how every story, how every TV show, how every radio show, how every book should follow these patterns. If you could do that per episode, you're golden. We're accustomed to hearing things in these ways. And of course, you're not telling a story per se. It's not fiction, but you can still take people through that journey. And the more you can do that, the better your audience will respond to it.
Love it.
Now I'm getting all weird and psychological, but you have to think about these things and you can see these patterns everywhere and you have to kind of learn. This is like how marketing works too. Just look everywhere, especially non-marketing places. Look at the marketing that people are doing. Like everything's being sort of trying to be sold or whatever, if it's an idea or a person or anything. And just see how these things work and kind of draw from everywhere and you'll podcast it.
Speaking of drawing, Chuck would like for you to get a whiteboard so you can diagram these conversations.
I have one.
He's got one. All right,
I
we might
do.
have to do. We'll just
can't-
steal from Rand
can't-
Fishkin. We'll do
You can't
whiteboard
see
Fridays.
what's on it. Yeah, you can't see what's on it yet, though, but it's there. I have another one over there, too, and one over there.
I feel like your rants would be even more intense if you had a pen that you were like waving near the camera for important points.
We should do it.
We should. Well, we're definitely doing more blabs because this was great. Sally, thank you for coming on. Yeah, let's keep doing these. I think it's fun interacting, having the people who are asking questions actually here to explain them. I love the chat that goes on. This is wonderful. Johnny's running out of coffee, so unfortunately we simply can't go on because his energy is just going to drop.
I'm down to water. That's it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another one of these sessions, and we'll see you in the community.
Like, he's exhausted. Thank you, guys. It was fun.